Hey guys, John Lee Dumas here, founder and host of EO Fire, and you're listening to Bravepreneur Parents Academy with ldquo.
Welcome to Bravepreneur Parents Academy, where the world's most inspiring entrepreneurs reveal their most defining childhood moments and share their legacy for raising brave little heroes who will grow up to change the world. And now, he still reads comic books under the blanket at bedtime. Please welcome your host, best-selling author, award-winning speaker, and self-confessed geek dad, ldquo. You know, like the hotel in Vegas? Yeah, no, that's really his name. ldquo.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Bravepreneur Parents Academy. Today, we have the pleasure of talking to Keith Zafren, founder of the Great Dads Project. He's written the book, How to Be a Great Dad, No Matter What Kind of Father You Had. Now, people work with Keith because they want to create great stories. They want to heal the wounds that maybe they had in relationships with their fathers. Well, Keith has spent 17 years learning firsthand how to raise 3 great boys and stay close to them no matter what. We're about to talk to Keith and really get down to the nitty-gritty of how to be a great dad no matter what your past was. Please give a warm welcome to Keith Zafren. Keith, welcome.
Thank you, Balaji. I'm glad to be with you today.
Keith, man, you are a superhero. First and foremost, we were chatting a few minutes earlier, and we established that you've got 3 teenagers in the house. How do you do it, sir? How do you do it?
3 teenage boys. It's awesome. It's a lot of testosterone, a lot of food, a lot of recent Marvel movies and talks about girls, but it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. I wouldn't trade it.
Now, what are their ages, Keith?
My oldest is 17. My middle son is turning 16 in a month, and my youngest is turning 14 in a couple of weeks.
Man, that is fantastic. That is congratulations.
Thank you.
For getting them this far. And I know they're going to grow up to be amazing, amazing dads. Now, Keith, one of the things you do professionally or have done, which I find fascinating, is that you worked in a prison entrepreneurship program.
That's right. Yeah, for 6 years, I served as a spiritual advisor and mentor, character development coach. I worked for about 6 years, as you said, with about 600 men in the Houston, Texas area. And I was brought in. It was ostensibly a business training program, but I was brought in to do more of the character development with the men. We called it the softer side, the side that would support their success as entrepreneurs once they got out of prison, not just teaching them a skill set, but the character that would support it.
Interesting, interesting. Keith, why was the focus on entrepreneurship as opposed to, say, employment?
Well, one of the great problems in our prison system is what is called recidivism, which is simply the return to prison rate. It's anywhere between 60 to 80% of men who get out of prison because of their convicted status. They can't find employment. They can't find places to live. The system itself almost sets them up again to recommit crimes. And so this program was designed to teach guys who already had entrepreneurial bent and skills proven in illegal ways
right.
to redirect those kind of skills into legitimate businesses where these guys could start their own businesses once they got out and not have to face that rejection after rejection after rejection finding employment. They could actually become tax-paying and law-abiding citizens contributing to the community.
Wow, fascinating.
It was great work.
What was the experience like, though, the first time you walked in there? Were you well received? How did that process go for you?
You know, I had done a little bit of work with inmates prior, but I had done it where they had been brought. It was a very low security, and they were brought out of the prison setting to meet with us. So this was the very first time that I went into a maximum security prison, walked in, through barbed wire, through locked gates, multiple gates, and it was just a very fish out of water kind of experience. But I knew I was going in to do something of value and to receive value. And that's what ended up happening. I think I got so much more out of this than the guys that I worked with over that 6-year period. It literally transformed me. It helped me be a better dad because I got to talk to these guys and learn their stories. You know, as I shared more and more of my history with my dad and the kind of dad I was trying to be with my boys, these men, you know, these, you know, I mean, I hate to use the word hardened criminals, but these were guys who were in jail and prison for murder, for drug-related issues, for really violent crimes. And yet these guys' hearts were open when I would talk about the pain in my life when I was rejected by my dad. My dad, you know, and these guys would start sharing their stories, their hearts, their desire to reconnect with kids who they abandoned. And they just asked me, how do I do it? And as I began to coach them, I was learning myself. And together, I think we became better dads together because of those years in prison.
Wow. That's mind-blowing. Now, Keith, the concept of fatherhood, when we talk about folks who are in jail, who've maybe made life decisions and come from less than ideal circumstances and ended up in the position at which you met them, what role do you think, did you see a pattern in terms of the role fatherhood played in them ending up at that juncture in their lives?
That's a great question. I really did. And it's something I observed and then began to research. And I found that the research supported my experience. And that is that when I call it the profound impact of fathers or the legacy that fathers leave, it's one of the things I try to teach all the men I work with. I teach them a skill set, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later, and I teach them a mindset. And this is the mindset that we're talking about, the profound impact fathers make without even knowing it or without intending to. That profound impact our fathers made on us and that we will invariably make upon our children.
Right.
And so when guys get that, that's when I can say that's why you need the skill set. Because if you don't know what you're doing and yet you're wielding great power, you're not going to wield it responsibly. You're not going to produce the kind of things in your kids that you would like to produce. And so what I found over and over and over with these 600 men, there was probably I couldn't count on one hand the number of men in prison who told me they had good relationships with their fathers.
Wow.
Or their fathers built them up or praised them or helped them grow or taught them about what it meant to be a man intentionally. What so many of these guys learned was that to be a man meant not being there, or it meant being abusive or being a criminal. And what happens particularly with boys who become men is that we want to be like our fathers because of that profound impact. And if our father was in prison, if our father didn't teach us good things about what it means to be a man, but modeled a life of indecency, of abusing women, of not respecting women, of using drugs, of using people, of violence, of crime, or if he put us down, like so many of these guys told me, when fathers would say to them, you're never going to amount to anything. Or, you're stupid. How are you ever going to? And what happened is that these guys inadvertently walked in the path that their fathers set for them through their words and through their model and example.
Wow. That's profound. You know, Keith, I want to talk a little bit about two things that you mentioned. You talked about helping these gentlemen with their mindset.
Yes.
On how to be great dads, and then you worked on their skill set. You gave
Yes.
them at least one skill. Why don't we let's unpack this.
Okay.
Let's talk about that mindset first. And, of course, this pertains to folks whether we have been in prison before or whether we've had estranged dads or even if we had a present dad but are still trying to get better as fathers right now. So, Keith, what's the mindset essential for men to become great dads?
Well, it's what we're just referring to, that we need to own how profoundly dads affect their children through their model, through their words, through their actions. When dads can grasp how profoundly a dad impacts his children, they can see it from both directions. They can look back in the past and see how their dad has impacted them, how so many of their own current decisions or parenting styles may have come from their father, and they need to choose which one of those they want to continue and which one of those they may want to discontinue or even break. And then looking forward, realizing how profoundly we're going to impact our children, and therefore wanting to do it responsibly, choosing the legacy that we want to leave, not doing it inadvertently.
That's powerful, and that warrants repeating. You said we need to actively choose the legacy we want to leave, not inadvertently just sort of leave one. You know, I find it fascinating that us modern parents, we do have a challenging time in that we don't necessarily have the support structure that maybe existed in previous generations when families, extended families, all lived close to one another. And you could rely on grandma, grandpa, cousins, uncles, aunts. There was a support system. These days, often moms and dads are stretched to breaking point a lot of times just trying to handle all the responsibilities. And that impact that you're referring to, Keith, that impact we have on our kids, sometimes we leave to chance.
Yeah. For example, I was just thinking about this as you were speaking, Balaji. Earlier in our conversation, you said, when I mentioned I have 3 teenage sons, you said, oh, I'm sure they're all going to grow up to be great dads.
Yes.
Well, of course, almost all of us dads hope that for our sons, right?
That. Yes.
But if I'm not intentional, if I'm not aware that that's not going to just happen, as you said, by chance, but it's my responsibility to actually raise them to be good men and to become good partners and great dads. And so I'm intentional about that. I'll talk to them and I'll say to them when they've done something that is, for instance, showing kindness or compassion toward another person. I'll say to them, that is such a beautiful quality in you. Wow. And it's going to make you such a great dad when you get to be a dad. Or I'll say to them, I'll say to them, do you have any idea how much I love you? And they'll say, yeah, I kind of do. And I said, you know what? I don't think you do. And I don't think you can until you're a dad yourself. And you begin to feel. And I'll use these just examples that come up during the day, or we're on a trip or in an email or a text I send to them. But I'm conscious of talking to them, even now as teenagers, about when they're dads themselves and pointing out good things they're doing that will make them good dads, so that already they're thinking about what it's going to be like when they become a dad. That it's not going to be just chance, but I'm laying out years and years and years of conversation and vision for what it means to become the dad that I hope they'll become and that they will want to be. And perhaps even more important than that is going back to the model, because I know now, because I've got this mindset now, I know that everything I do with them is modeling what a dad is like. So almost no matter what I say, they're going to end up being very similar to me.
Wow.
So
that's a lot of responsibility.
Well, it's great inspiration, Balaji, isn't it? It just makes me realize if I want them to be great dads, I need to show them, not just tell them. I need to show them what a great dad is, and that's how I want to be with them. So I collect resources all the time. I ask friends. I have written this book, based on my research and experience, and that's why I'm in the business of training other dads in the skill set that we're probably going to talk about next.
Wow. Okay. So I think you've sold us beyond a shadow of a doubt, Keith, that the responsibility that we have to be intentional about making our children, growing our children to be great, to be loved, to be well nurtured. Let's get into the skill set, Keith, because having that desire and that intent is certainly a big step. But now we actually need the training. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about some of the skills that maybe you were able to teach these gentlemen at the prison and some of the skills that you teach through your books and your workshops?
Yeah, I try to keep it very simple, Balaji, and through my research and child development, I have summarized so much of what a child needs, a boy or a girl, from their father into 3 skills that all begin with the letter A to make it more memorable. And
all right, folks, take notes right here. This is a summary of years of research.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
If you imagine a 3-legged stool, that's how I like to envision this, because each one of those legs bears equal weight when someone sits on that stool. If someone says, well, which one of these skills is more important than the other? It's impossible to say. They're all important, and they're equally important as they work together to support the vision of great fathering. Very quickly, the 3 are called affirmation, acceptance, and affection. Would you like me to unpack those a little bit?
I'm intrigued. Let's please do that.
Affirmation is the positive words of praise that we speak to our children. To affirm means to build up, right? It means to acknowledge what is true. And it may not be true in reality yet, but it's true in my vision. And I want to draw my kids up to that vision. So I look for anything I can praise. The 1 Minute Manager, the famous best-selling business book years ago, it said, look for opportunities to praise. And so
catch them doing good.
Exactly. Catch them doing something right and tell them. And it can just be a 1-minute affirmation. It doesn't need to be a big, long, drawn-out thing. Dads can do this. In fact, I've created these beautiful postcards that I've give to dads to send to their kids. It's just such an easy way to say, I'll love you forever, or I'm proud of you, or you're such a great kid, or do you have any idea how awesome you are? But little things like that. So when I'm with my boys, and it doesn't have to be about an accomplishment. It's not necessarily about getting the A in school or making
scoring the goal.
Exactly. Those things are easy for us dads to praise when they're praiseworthy, and that's perfectly fine. But if that's all we praise, what we teach our kids is that they have to perform in order to get our love. And so I try to encourage dads to be very specific and praise things in character. When you see your kid being responsible, or telling the truth, or getting his homework done, or being kind to a brother or sister or a friend, or sharing a toy, I try to take that moment and just say, I saw you do that, and it's so awesome to see when you're generous with your friends. No wonder your friends like you so much.
I'm not letting you get off the hook. You're not going to the second one yet, because that you just dropped a bomb right in our living room here. You gotta explain it. Why do you think it is, Keith, that this doesn't occur naturally, particularly for us men? I suspect that moms do this a little more naturally. Why doesn't it come so naturally for us guys?
Well, Balaji, my experience, myself and with all the men I've worked with, is because it didn't happen for us. It's very difficult to give away what you have not received. It's very tough to give out of a vacuum. And so that's why I work with going back to the mindset, understanding this profound impact my dad had on me, and why it's so hard for me psychologically and culturally to talk about my feelings, to express praise when I don't know. Well, I'll back up a little bit and I'll say, I think most of us men are affirmation junkies. Because many of us have such a deficit in our lives, we go around seeking it everywhere. Right?
Wow.
And honestly, it's why many of us men spend most of our energy at work rather than at home.
Whoa.
Because it's a lot easier to get that praise, to seek it and to find it from a manager or a boss, to get that raise, to get that compliment, to get that corner office, to get that parking spot, whatever it is, that pat on the back. Because so many of us have such a deficit, because we need it and crave it, we go where we can find it. And we don't get that much at home. Our kids aren't often saying to us when they're 6 years old, man, you are such a great dad. I just love the way you praise me. Or you model consistency and loyalty. It's just so awesome, Dad. We don't hear that.
That's hilarious, but I can see how if I was on the receiving end of that would make my month.
It sure would. And it's what I teach women when I speak to women about how to help your man be a better dad.
Wow.
Because what I'm about to say goes both ways. It works for us as men, and it's why it works for our kids. When we hear that we've done something well, when we're praised for something we've done right,
yes,
we want to do it again, don't we?
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
True.
And it's why it works with our kids. When we say to them, I love to see how generous you are with your friends. No wonder they love being around. What does my kid want to do?
He wants to be more generous.
Yeah, he's going to look for another opportunity to be generous because he's praised for it. Right? And it works with responsibility. It works with truth-telling. It just works.
Gosh. This is a different way of doing things, Keith.
Well, it's a very positive approach. It's the other side of discipline. Sometimes we talk about disciplining our kids and shaping and forming them, and I'm all for that. But it has to be enfolded in these three skills, and particularly this positive affirmation, speaking and writing words of praise to our kids for who they are, for their character, even more so than their accomplishments or their achievements or their appearance. Our little girls need to know we adore them and are so proud of them, and not just because they're pretty. Right? Because if all we praise is how beautiful and pretty they are, then they grow up thinking that's what they have to be in order to be accepted.
Accepted. Well, you just used the word accepted, so I want to see if we can go to that second skill. The first skill was affirmation. Mm-hmm. That blew my mind. That was just the first one. Keith, talk a little bit about acceptance. Why is that one of the key skills that describes a great dad?
Because acceptance gives our kids a sense of belonging, which all our kids are searching for. It's why when they grow up to be teenagers, they tend to move out into their peer group so much, because they're looking for the acceptance that so many of them don't find at home. And here's, in my opinion, why. Many of us dads confuse acceptance and approval. If we don't approve of something our kids have said or done, we don't know how to still communicate acceptance of them. Does that make sense? Right? So we don't like the way our kids throw a tantrum every time they don't get their way. We don't like the way that they treat their brother or sister, the way they speak to their mother, or later the music they listen to, or that they want to get a tattoo, or the boyfriends or girlfriends that they want to hang out with, or that they want to drink or you go on and on and on. There are so many things as a parent over the years that you are not going to approve of.
That's right.
The key is figuring out how to not only do this, but communicate it. That even though I don't agree or approve, I still accept and love you. Let me give you a little example to try to make this more concrete.
Please.
My oldest boy had a particularly difficult time telling the truth as he was growing up, more so than the others. And anyway, there was one point where I caught him in such an obvious lie, and I had to say to him, and I'm just not using his name for his own privacy right now, but I said to him, I want you to know that even though lying is not okay, and when you lie to me, it breaks trust. And son, if we can't trust each other, the basis of our relationship goes away. So truth-telling is so, so important to building close, good relationships. And I want a good and close relationship with you. You cannot lie to me. But I need you to know this. Even if you do, I still love you. And I will always accept you, no matter what. And those last 3 words, in my seminars, I actually make guys say them out loud. I train men to always use those words when they're trying to demonstrate acceptance, no matter what. I accept you. You still belong here. You will always be my daughter. You will always be my son, even if I disagree with your religious preferences or your sexual preferences or your political affiliation or whatever it is. Even if you choose to do drugs when I've trained you over and over not to, I will always love you. You will always have a place with me. I do not accept that choice. I don't agree with or approve of that choice, but you need to know I will never reject you. Do you see the difference?
I want to talk about that.
Okay.
I want to talk about that because this makes complete sense to me. And I'll share a little anecdote a little bit that is just really coincidental. But before I get to that, I anticipate that a lot of us dads, while we actually feel the way you've described, while we actually know in our hearts and our minds that we will love our children no matter what, absolutely no matter what they do, I suspect that we fear that if we tell them that will be open season on all those that list of horrible, most horrible things we have in the back of our minds that we don't want them to do. We feel like that's the thin veneer keeping them from jumping into that list.
I know.
The fact that dad is going to be so displeased with me, I can't even stand it. So how do you help dads get over that fear? Whether it's rational or not, it's there.
Yeah, well, it actually is quite rational. It just doesn't work. Fear is no basis for relationship. And it's ultimately relationship that our kids are going to want. And again, it's why kids move out into their peer group away from their parents, particularly in their adolescence, because they find that acceptance among their peers when they feel, and that's the key word, when they feel like their parents are rejecting them. And their parents may not be rejecting them. Their parents may be disapproving of their behavior or their choices or their values. But if a parent isn't very, very clear about this, even though in their hearts they feel like they love their children, here's the key. The kids don't feel it.
Wow.
It doesn't matter if the parent feels it.
Wow.
The kid has to feel it. And the only way he or she is going to feel it is if we communicate it, not only with our words, but that emotion that says, I don't like the way you hide the truth. Yeah. I really don't like that. And I want you to know that is not something that I approve of.
Yeah.
But I love you. And you wrap your arms around them even after they've just lied to you. And you still discipline them. Here's the discipline for lying. But I need you to remember in the midst of this discipline, I love you. And I will always love you because you are my daughter, and that'll never change. You see, when I do that, when you do that, when any dad does that with their kids, the need to leave the home at 14, and I don't mean move out, but to go out and to have their primary identity with a bunch of other 14 or 15 or 16-year-olds.
Right.
Who are not going to give them good advice.
Understatement.
Right? The need for that diminishes. It's still going to be there to some degree because that's natural child development. Peer group becomes very important. But to reject my parents' values and life and to find it only in my peers, that is belonging. That's why the guys I worked with in prison, many of them ended up in gangs. Right? Because that's where they found belonging. That's where they found someone who said, hey man, I've got your back. No matter what you do, you belong here.
Wow.
And you see, we set our kids up to find those alternative families if they don't know that they belong in ours, if they don't feel that they belong in ours, even if they color their hair or get tattoos or body piercings or whatever it is. I may not like that stuff. My boy colored his hair bright blue. Like, why? Like, are you kidding? But I I just told them, like, no matter what color you have, or you shave your head, I don't care. It's your hair. You get to do what you want with it. I love you, not your hair. Right? It doesn't matter. Acceptance.
Wow.
No matter what.
No matter what. Those three words, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Keith, let's talk about the third skill of becoming a great dad, which is affection. Talk to us a little bit about affection.
I try to teach dads both spoken words of affection and physical expressions of it. And again, as you pointed out earlier, it's very difficult for some of us men to do this, again, because our dads probably didn't do this for us. Most of us if we were lucky, had dads who believed that they loved their family best by providing financially. Right? And those of us men who did that, we should be extremely thankful for that. But there's so much more that kids need than financial provision. And physical and spoken words of affection is one of the key elements of helping kids know that they are loved. Right? Telling them, showing them, braiding your daughter's hair, holding your son's hand when you walk. As the kids get older, fist bumps and chest bumps, or, walking my son off the soccer field, just putting my arm around him, or when he comes off, giving him a fist bump and just saying, man, you played your heart out today. You were awesome, or it's so fun to watch you.
Oh, man.
And I'll say things like that even now. My middle son is a very, very talented soccer player, and he's the leading scorer on his team. And, it's very fun to watch him perform well. But even still, I'm very careful about not only praising his performance, because I want him to know that if in any given game he performs poorly, he's going to walk off that field and he's still going to get a very proud father who loves him, regardless of how he performs. So when he does perform well, when he has a hat trick, I need to make sure that I say things like I just said, that it's so fun watching you play. Or I love, that was amazing watching that hat trick, but it was also awesome that you had 2 assists, where you didn't have to make it your own goal, but you helped your teammates score. I love seeing that in you, that kind of thing. But it's always, not always, but I should say it's always, I'm always conscious of adding the spoken or the physical expression of affection to the affirmation and the acceptance.
Wow. Yeah, this is really profound, and I want to move on to the next question real quick, but just the personal anecdote that I alluded to a few minutes earlier. I'm a member of my local Toastmasters group, and one of the other gentlemen in there, he's maybe 10 years older than I am. His kids are older than mine, and he gave a speech where he talks about not getting a lot of outward displays of affection from his dad when he was a child. And because of that, he makes it a point to tell his kids every night, he tells them specifically, and I quote, I love you always and forever, no matter what.
I love it.
No matter, he didn't come up with this himself. He found it somewhere. He heard it somewhere. He liked it, and he adopted it. And when I heard it, it so changed my outlook, because in the culture that I grew up in, those outward displays of affection were not socially common. The parents loved their kids just as in any other society. They just didn't typically express that love in such an outward fashion. Now, my wife, on the other hand, her side of the family, they're very, very outspoken in their displays of affection.
Beautiful.
And my wife and I started, I was like, I like the way your family does it. Let's do it that way for our kids. So I tell my boys every night, I love you. But when I heard this gentleman say, I love you always and forever, no matter what, I was like, that's another level. It's not another level of love. It doesn't mean I love my kids any less if I don't say that. But in terms of expression, the first time I did it with my kids, they were in bed and they both sat up. They were like, really?
Yeah, well, it's expressing more than love, Balaji, and that's what's so important, because you're telling them I love you, but then you're also saying, and you belong here, and then you're saying, and you will forever, right? That's the point. It's not just that I love you, because it's wonderful for kids to know I love you, but what they fear is if they get a D in school,
wow,
then you'll stop. Or if they, as they grow up, they make bigger and badder decisions. They lie to you, they steal, they get caught, they wreck the car. But what you're saying to them is, I love you, yes, but you also belong here, and you always will, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
It's more than love.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that's powerful. I got to tell you, their reaction to that was to start testing me right away.
Of course,
like,
yeah.
Well, what if I do this? And I'd yell, no matter what, over my shoulder.
That's awesome.
And they'd say, well, what if I do that? And they're 8 and 5. So, on the scale of bad things kids can do, their imagination doesn't go very far at all.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So there was nothing outrageous. But so I've been doing that for about a week.
Yeah.
And now after a week, it's not unusual for them to hear that now. The first several times it was unusual. But now it's kind of normal. They kind of get it now. And so it's just really coincidental that this is one of the skills that you've been teaching, because I just learned that 7 days ago.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, I teach that very thing in my book, and I talk about how for years and years my kids heard every night. I took some words out of the New Testament, a blessing that God the Father spoke to Jesus, and then some other words, and kind of shaped them with mine. And I would say to my kids, you are my beloved son, and I will never leave you, and I will never forsake you. I will always love you, no matter what. So that it does. And when your kids hear that week after week, month after month, year after year, it builds this kind of settled confidence that we're tight. Like nothing is going to change this. We can weather anything.
Powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Powerful. Keith, so help me understand this. We've spoken a little bit, and you didn't necessarily learn these skills you're sharing by modeling from what you received as a child.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how a dad who maybe didn't receive that kind of affirmation, acceptance, and affection moves beyond that? How do you move from feeling wounded as a child to being an effective and fulfilled father?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's not a simple or short answer, but in a condensed format, it's what some of the wisdom of Alcoholics Anonymous says. What we don't pass back, we pass down. What we don't pass back, we pass down. And I think in brief, it's saying we have got to deal with the past. It's not something we can just shut down, pretend it's not there, and move on as if it doesn't affect us. This goes right back to the mindset I was describing at the beginning. To be a great dad, I believe, and I have seen in hundreds of cases, if men don't deal with the relationship with their dad, the profound impact he had on me, right, then we end up repeating without remembering. We end up hearing some of our dad's words coming out of our mouth, or treating our kids in similar ways, even if we swore we would never do it. That vow is easily broken. Because it's in us, and what's in us is going to come out. And so what I had to do over years was to go through a healing process where I felt that pain that I had not wanted to feel all my childhood, because it's so darn painful. Yeah. But I had to allow it to come. I had to let it pass through. Alcoholics Anonymous, I think, also says that the only way to the other side of grief is through it. You can't go around it. You can't circumvent it. You've got to go through it. And so if a man did not have a good relationship with his dad, or there is a wound that exists, part of that process that I talk about in my book, I use a 6-step process that I went through. Part of it is feeling that grief, moving through it to the place of forgiving my dad when I get there, and then letting my child inside of me grow up. I just have found over and over and over in my own case, so many other men I've worked with, that we tend to get stunted in our growth wherever that wound deeply occurred. And so many of us men are really like adolescent boys, teenage boys in grown men's bodies, still seeking that affirmation. I saw an interview, Balaji, of a 65-year-old man, and they asked him, they were talking about his past, his relationship with his dad, and they asked him, what do you wish your father had said to you? Mm-hmm. Now, this man was 65 years old, right? Probably a grandfather himself. Mm-hmm. And yet when he was asked that question, what do you wish your dad had said to you? He started to cry. And he said, I just wish my father would have told me he was proud of me. Wow. 65. Still wanting to hear those words from his dad. Still needing that affirmation that he never got. And so I think it's essential for us to go through that healing and re-parenting ourselves process to grow up to be mature men, whole men, who can now not give out of a vacuum, but begin to give to our kids the very things that we needed. I write in my book about how parenting my boys was part of my healing process because I realized I not only had the 3 little guys and the 2 little guys you have, I not only had these little boys that I was parenting, but I was actually reparenting the little guy in me. Wow. It's why I use the phrase that men can actually become the dads they wish they'd had. Right? Not just for our kids, but for the little guy in me who never got that from my dad. I had to learn how to give it to myself so then I could give it to my boys.
Wow. Wow. Keith, we're going to have to get you back on because we've taken up too much of your time already.
Oh, I love it, Balaji. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I mean, goodness, we're just at the tip of the iceberg here. There's so many questions I could ask. Folks, I know you guys are blown away by the value that Keith is giving us right now. Keith, where can we pick up the book, How to Be a Great Dad, no matter what kind of father you had?
The print and the digital versions are available at Amazon. You can just type in How to Be a Great Dad or my name, Keith Zafren. You can get, again, the print and the digital version. And the audio book, which I recorded myself, is about ready to post. I think maybe next week, I think it's going to be available. So that'll also, you can find that on Amazon as well.
Oh, that's going to be great. I listen to books on audible.com all the time, which is an Amazon company now.
Right, that's where you'll be able to find it. Thank you.
Yeah, as soon as that book comes out, I am on it. Do you offer any kind of courses or coaching or anything like that for dads?
I do small group and one-on-one coaching through Skype. I love that, and it's where many of those men not only work on those important skill sets in their own individual unique situation, but they're also free over time to begin working on this mindset and this healing journey that we were just talking about. I also have 3 free training videos that I would love to make available to your listeners. If you went to my website, thegreatdadsproject.org/dads, they can get 3 free training videos. Each one is a deeper experience and explanation of what we just talked about: affirmation, acceptance, and affection.
That is perfect. Guys, go to that website right now. I'm going to do the same as soon as we get off this call. It is thegreatdadsproject.org/dads.
Exactly.
DADS.
Thank you, Balaji.
Folks, we've been listening to Keith Zafren. He is a Jack Canfield Certified Success Skills Trainer. He's the author of the award-winning book, How to Be a Great Dad, No Matter What Kind of Father You Had. He's worked with over 600 young men in the prison entrepreneurship program, and he's the founder of the Great Dads Project. Keith, it's been a privilege and a pleasure.
Pleasure for me too, Balaji. Thank you.
Folks, check Keith's work out, and we'll be back again tomorrow on the Bravepreneur Parents Academy. This is Balaji O signing off. Until next time, up, and away!
Thanks for supporting my dad's show. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to iTunes. He said hot chocolate is for closers. If you don't subscribe, I don't get hot chocolate. I love hot chocolate.
Fear not. Although this chapter of Bravepreneur Parents Academy has come to its conclusion, we have many more adventures for you and your brave little heroes. Head over to bravequest.me for access to the Brave Quest Journal, an interactive activity playbook that rewards your little ones with points for accomplishing tasks that build character and unleash your child's inner superhero all before bedtime. We look forward to having you join us for more adventures next time on Bravepreneur Parents Academy.